All right, it's time for another session. It's 1 o'clock, 11/9/2022, 1300 for you military types. Gonna move fast like usual because there's lots to cover. Midterm elections are going on. Going to talk about that quickly here in a second because I think there's some stuff worth pointing out there, and you'll understand what I'm talking about in a second. But elections are going on. Somebody asked me what the picture was that I had on my sort of posting for this thing. I was just interested to see if there was actually an end to the Great Wall of China, because I was thinking of firewalls and Great Firewall of China. No. Anyway, looking it up, apparently that picture is of the end of the Great Wall of China. So I guess all walls end somewhere, even ones that are thousands of miles. Maybe it's total horseshit. I don't know, but I just thought it was an interesting pick. So that's what that's for. Moving on, let's talk about election stuff. Now, number one, elections are still going. There's nothing done. I'm not going to talk politics because that's never a topic anybody should get into if they're not an expert, and I'm definitely not one. However, I'm big into misinformation, disinformation, not big into it, but big into learning and reading and analyzing that type of stuff. And there's a report in Reuters. I never can say that right. Reuters, I think it is. I'll cover that quickly, and then I want to talk about election infrastructure, and there's an issue there. So this was published by Reuters or Reuters, however the hell you say it, on the 7th of November, so 2 days ago. Russia's Prigozhin admits interfering in U.S. elections. From London, Russian businessman Yevgeny Prigozhin said on Monday he had interfered in U.S. elections and would continue doing so in the future. The first such admission from a figure implicated by Washington in efforts to influence American politics. Okay, so in the concept of being real about something, like, everyone should understand globally in elections and cyber and combat and warfare and whatever else, there are agreements, but there's still a lot of things that go on between all of us in this constant combat space. Do we have things going on as the United States that would be considered influence in other areas? Sure. You ever studied the Vietnam War and those types of things? Did the Russians influence elections, and are they working to influence elections now? Yes. Will it stop? No. Is China also doing it? The point is that influence operations are very, very real. They are happening. And I think that this is worth noting just because this is someone who is kind of tasked with this from the Kremlin, admitting that this is going on. So in comments posted by the press service of his Concord catering firm, Russia's Facebook equivalent, Prigozhin said, "We have interfered in U.S. elections. We are interfering, and we will continue to interfere carefully, accurately, surgically, and in our own way as we know how to do." So, I mean, when someone admits to that type of thing, number one, it's because you're not going to be able to get them. There's not any extradition or anything else like that. But it's them basically admitting straight up, like, look, we interfere in elections. He said, this is Prigozhin, "During our pinpoint operations, we will remove both kidneys and the liver at once." Don't know exactly what that means. Pretty cryptic statement, but doesn't sound good. If you ask me. So yeah. Prigozhin, who is often referred to as Putin's chef because his catering company operates Kremlin contracts, has been formally accused of sponsoring Russia-based troll farms that seek to influence U.S. politics. If you don't know what a troll farm is, Google it and go look it up. It's pretty staggering when you see the amount of effort that goes into these types of things. I wrote about this in my cyber warfare book. So there you go. U.S. State Department has offered $10 million reward for Prigozhin in connection with engagement in U.S. election interference. He's been hit by European Union sanctions and U.S. sanctions, whatever. He also served 9 years in prison during the Soviet times for robbery and other crimes before going to business in the 1990s. So this is a guy who's affiliated with criminal organizations, known to do criminal things, admitting that there are interference operations going on with U.S. elections. I think that pretty much ends that argument, conversation, however you want to talk about it. Now, that being said, because the elections were going on and because there's all these things going on about election systems and interference and whatever else, I thought, well, how hard would it be to find potentially vulnerable election-related systems? And I'm not going to put any of the specifics out here because this is, in my opinion, very dangerous stuff to be messing with. But again, everything I'm doing is above board and totally legal. However, someone should go fix this. And I have already sent some notifications to people that are affiliated with these systems. But if you go look through, there's a couple Tor forums, you can find queries that will give you information about the types of queries you could run via Google Dorks and Shodan Dorks and those types of things to find potentially, not guaranteed, but potentially vulnerable, misconfigured election-related systems. So in this sort of, annals of doing things that I do, I was able to find 23 of these election-related systems. To be specific, they are voter-related systems. I'm not going to go any further into than that because this is potentially risky, but 23 of them. A lot of them are in California. Matter of fact, I think when I look at this, all 23 of these actually are in California. So California seems to have some issues with its systems, if you will, around elections and security for voting infrastructure. Does this mean that the elections are invalid and whatever else? No, but does it mean that there's problems there that we should be aware of and look at and address and be real about it? Yes, that's my 2 cents. So, like I said, I've already notified these organizations. I don't know if they'll actually come back and ask me to do anything about it or whatever, or send me another cease and desist letter like the pile I have already. But there you go. Now, following on to that, because it was interesting to see that there was potentially misconfigured, vulnerable voting-ish, election-related-ish systems, there was a couple of companies that were noted within those configurations that were supposed to be providing security services for those assets. If you crawl through the right things on the internet and you look for the right stuff, it's pretty easy for you to figure out what organizations are doing that. And then doing a little bit of further digging, those organizations that are supposed to be securing the infrastructure for those systems that I already said were found to be vulnerable, I found 55 misconfigurations for that particular service provider, all of which are related to VPN. So, there's like a cascading kind of level of effect here, if you think about it from the perspective of the adversary of, okay, maybe I could find misconfigured election-related systems, possible. Maybe I can't find that, but could I find vulnerable infrastructure that's tied to the service providers that are tasked with securing said infrastructure? There you go. So there's 55 of them, all VPNs, all outdated, all needing to be managed, maintained, and controlled. Problem. So, there's that. Again, 55, 23. So we're getting up in the, hundreds, 3-digit type thing. So that's all I'm going to say about that, because I don't want to go any further down that rabbit hole and get myself in any trouble. But just, be real and be aware that that is something that's out there. So, hopefully someone addresses these things when they're notified, because I will notify them. Matter of fact, I already sent out some stuff. Moving on to better things, potentially. There's an article on c4isr.net, or ISRnet, excuse me, by Colin Demarest, November 8th. Pentagon to unveil zero trust cyber strategy. Hooray. The US DoD will be publishing in the coming days its plan to achieve a new level of cybersecurity. The CISO for the Pentagon, John Sherman, said Monday that he approved the plan last Thursday, so last week, and it's going through public review process. The documents, he said, should be out very soon. I'm on bated breath waiting for this. The strategy will lay out the Pentagon's approach to realizing zero trust, which comprises more than 100 activities and so-called pillars. Sounds like a framework that someone created. Interesting. To keep data secure, et cetera, et cetera. So a couple more things that are worth noting here. Defense Sherman previously imposed a 5-year deadline to implement zero trust. Sherman said on Monday that the target is a heavy lift. So everybody always asks, how fast can you get to ZT, whatever else? The DoD, and there's another quote here from this individual. We're talking about getting this done by 2027. So 5 years from now, 5-ish years from now, for a 4 million person enterprise. We've learned from a number of big companies whose names who have been down this path, that services have to be part of this. So the big government, the DoD, multi-billion-dollar effort, and I've seen all the stuff around this. It's a huge thing. I'm waiting for the final plan here, but They're saying it's going to take them a minimum, not that they're going to be done in 5 years, because it's the government, nothing gets done in 5 years, a minimum of 5 years to get towards some semblance of ZT. And by the way, they're saying flat out, we need and recognize the need for service providers to help us do this. So what does that mean for everyone else? It means that it's going to take you time to get towards ZT. And it means, in my opinion, you should be engaging with service providers to help you enable ZT. The government has the resources, assets. They can print money if they want to. They could do this themselves, but they're being smart about it, and they're realizing that there's a reality that they have to deal with. Therefore, they're looking to leverage service providers. It talks about Thunderdome and a $6 million contract with Booz Allen and whatever else, but that's neither here nor there. This is a much larger effort. I know a lot of the organizations are involved in this, so take some insight away from that. This is a big deal. The government's engaged in it. You're talking multi-billion dollars worth of work. Note that they said it's going to take them a minimum of 5 years to get there, probably more likely much longer. Oh, and by the way, they want service providers to help them. So what should you do? I wonder. Now, following on to that, there's an article on the Hill, Michael Daniel and Megan Stifel. I don't even like I think the actual title for this is bad. So cyber incident reporting isn't the problem, ignorance is. Now, number one, let's look at the definition of the word ignorant, because I think this is worth noting. And this is from Merriam-Webster. Ignorant, destitute of knowledge or education, lacking knowledge or comprehension of the thing specified, resulting from or showing lack of knowledge or intelligence. Now, the last one's probably a little bit more accurate, but in reality, what we're talking about here is the people on the Hill are not ignorant of cybersecurity requirements and all the things that need to go on there. They're not. I do a lot of consulting with those organizations. Ignorance would mean that they're not informed, that they don't understand, whatever else. They know. They've been beat to death with this. They have a definite understanding of what we're talking about in cyber, but they're not going about it realistically. They're being lobbied and pushed and shoved around to write rules, laws, and legislation that will serve organizations that are trying to make money off of this cyber thing. Jerry Kennedy's saying add apathy and arrogance. Yeah, I would add that into that mix. But I mean, the reality of this is that they're also not being very pragmatic about the whole thing. It talks about voluntary reporting here, or simply relying on industry report incidents voluntarily hasn't been enough. We still lack key data about cyber incidents. We have lots and lots of data, so that's not accurate either. What's the overall rate of incidents? Again, we have lots and lots of data from lots of different sources. It hasn't been managed, maintained, or maintained or collated by any particular presiding organization, and that's part of the problem. Can we use the knowledge about an incident at one company to prevent something bad from happening to another? I thought there was an entire industry created around exactly that thing called the threat intelligence space. Like, why is that even a question? Acknowledging that voluntary reporting isn't sufficient. It's not. Congress passed legislation earlier this year requiring critical infrastructure owners to report substantial cyber incidents. Define substantial for me, because I don't know that the definition of substantial is actually well understood and accurate. While almost everyone supports mandatory reporting in theory, some organizations are trying to weaken the new requirements. Lobby, right? That's what we're talking about. They argue that reporting requirements could harm them. They argue the data could be used for regulatory enforcement. Why would it not be used for regulatory enforcement? And the federal government cannot protect incident data shared with it. Okay. Given these concerns, these organizations are trying to narrow the reporting requirements as much as possible to avoid being subject to mandate. So much like you see in every other industry, government starts squeezing, people start freaking out, lawyers get involved, and all of a sudden the requirements that actually had teeth start whittling away. Now, this article does say, however, those concerns are not grounded in reality. The law specifically prohibits the use of reported information for being used for regulatory purposes. So that would negate that argument. While adequate protection is a legitimate concern, the solution for CISA to invest in effective cybersecurity for incident data. We cannot combat cyber threats effectively, don't have better data about attacks. That includes mandated reporting. Need to know the number, type, and distribution of cyber incidents across our digital ecosystem. We now have the legislation foundation to collect said data. As CISA works through the details, we should take this opportunity to collect as much data as practical while keeping the burden to a minimum. Now, I think that that's probably worth pointing out right there, that that's not really realistic as far as collecting all the data everywhere. Doesn't mean that all the data everywhere is valuable. We do have a threat intelligence industry. We do have sharing. We've got these things called InfraGard. We've got a lot of stuff that bounces around with between different organizations. The sharing, I think, is already there. It's really what's the good data that's being used and how is it being leveraged. Kind of the wrap up here. We believe that CISA should maintain broad coverage for reporting requirements, define significant cyber incidents. I agree. To only encompass incidents when real harm has occurred. Now, there's the lawyerese getting in here. Real harm has occurred. Define real harm for me in a cyber incident. Did someone die? Then it's not real harm. Or someone could argue that. If it's someone lost their bank account, to me, that's real harm. To you, might not be because you don't give a shit about my bank account. So define real harm and follow a set of principles such as allowing for updates and developing the regulation. The comments also provide sample reporting formats complete with information fields. In particular, CISA should ensure that our reporting process is easily. So again, like this is part of the problem when the Hill and the legislators and the lawyers get involved here. They don't know the cyberspace. They don't know about sticks. They don't know about taxi. They don't know about incident reporting. They don't know about threat intelligence, all these things. So here's people that are at the top of the stack here, influencing and talking to staffers and et cetera. And they're fucking it up by mixing in things and legalese that's going to screw this up. A lot of this stuff already exists. It's already there, but it's wrong. And this is the wrong way to go about this. This is just introducing more kerfuffle into the system that doesn't need it. And that's my dog barking, because it wouldn't be a call without the dog barking, but what are you going to do, right? So let's go a little bit further down into one of those, into another article. This is from Andy Ellis. CISOs are still chiefs in name only. I think this is pretty valid and pretty useful, pretty interesting stuff. So, and Ellis is advisory CISO for Orca Security. CISOs are still chief in name only. If you're not in the meeting where decisions are made, then you're not part of the C-suite, whatever your title may be. 1000% absolutely correct. Clap, clap, clap. Look around the CISO community, you'll find signs of burnout everywhere. Where CISOs aren't just quitting, you'll find increasing tension between them and their executives, sometimes resulting in surprising departures. Ply a friendly CISO with their favorite alcoholic beverage and a promise of being off the record, and you hear stories that will raise your hackles, which I think from the South, yeah. CISOs prodded to mislead the board. CISOs summarily dismissed when pointing out security issues. CISOs that other executives won't talk to. Security projects committed and then defunded. CISOs do talk to each other, and the stress in the industry is real, mounting in a serious problem. It's all in the title, Chief Information Security Officer, or if you're really super cool, merely Chief Security Officer. That chief at the beginning carries a lot of weighty expectations. You've made it. You're the top of the heap. You're part of the C-suite, the executive team that guides the business, or not, is what he says. Survey after survey tries to ferret out who the CISO reports to, and the results are pretty dismal. The CISO does not report to the CEO. There are some surveys that don't define reports very well. If you report to the CISO, according to Andy, and you're in the CISO staff meeting, not that extended kumbaya thing that they do once a month, then you're part of the process. If you're not directly talking to the CEO as a CISO, then you're not part of that staff. Maybe you get to tweak decisions around the edges, but it's rare that you influence a major decision if you're not part of the CEO's small team. Security is a top 10 risk of nearly every Fortune 500 company. It isn't going to be properly addressed with a CISO always running around cleaning up the problems created by decisions made in a room without a security presence. A CISO that is treated often like a proverbial dancing bear, showing up on demand and performing the demystifying security routine for the board to give them comfort, then go back trying to backfill positions with non-competitive salaries and chasing incident after incident isn't a recipe for success now or in the future. Until the CISO is truly integrated in the C-suite and major decisions gain the benefit of their counsel, companies and CISOs alike will continue to pay the price. Absolutely. This is super good stuff to read. It's on CSO Online. I would go look at this and read through it, and there's a couple of references to different surveys in there. This is correct. Like, this is, for me personally, I had a couple of job offers for really large organizations to be CISO, and thank God I did my due diligence and really crawled through it, because it would have been career or potentially future ending for me, the way that they were running stuff. And we've seen this, we saw it with Twitter, we've seen it with Uber, we've seen it with a whole lot of organizations where they want, like you said, the dancing bear, and they'll bring you in and parade you around to the board and whoever else that they've got a quote, whatever, rock star CISO. And then guess what? They'll crucify you when things go wrong. They don't actually give a damn what you have to say. And then they'll just let security fail because it's the way they do business. So go read this. I think that this is super, super useful information, and we should have more people that are being as honest as Andy is here. Moving along, this is in the Wall Street Journal, and this is what I think is one of the all-time bad ideas in cyber. The Red Cross wants digital symbols to deter hackers from healthcare institutions. The international organization proposed 3 options that could serve as the digital equivalent of the Red Cross symbol. Basically, what it says here is that the Red Cross wants to put together a marking sort of system for emblems that would go on sites and would let bad guys and adversaries know that they were targeting something that's affiliated with healthcare or helping others, hospitals, those types of systems. In theory, that sounds like a good idea. What it really is doing is painting a giant bullseye on those organizations and saying, please, by all means, we are very critical, we are extremely useful, and we have something of value for the purposes of serving others. Please come rip us to shreds. So I think that this is one of the worst ideas I've heard of in a long time. And the other thing that I don't know how they didn't recognize this is in combat and warfare, which cyber warfare is a very real thing, and that's where a lot of this engagement takes place. You have to deal with the fact that people don't play by the rules, especially the bad guys. I mean, if you've ever seen Saving Private Ryan, when they're storming the beach, they're not looking for who's got a red cross on them and not shooting them. You know what I mean? So that's what's going on here. This is more misguided attempts by people to come up with what seem like valid ideas. And it's not that it's a bad idea, but it's just not good in practice. So don't go put a big "please don't hack us" symbol on your thing, because you're just drawing attention to yourself. It's not a good way to stay low. Finally here, SolarWinds reaches $26 million settlement with shareholders, expects SEC action. SolarWinds has agreed to pay $26 million to settle a shareholder lawsuit, both related to the infamous 2020 supply chain security fiasco, according to the regulatory filing, which I've got the 8K because it's publicly available out there. SolarWinds reached a deal with investors who sued the company, alleging they were misled about its security posture in advance of the Russian cyber attack on the business, according to 8K filing. The settlement must still be approved by a judge, would require SolarWinds to pay out $26 million in claims, as well as shareholders' legal fees and the cost of administering the settlement. SolarWinds does not admit any wrongdoing. So this happened because January shareholders sued SolarWinds. The business asked a federal judge to throw out the lawsuit, insisting that SolarWinds was, quote, the victim of the most sophisticated cyber attack in history. That's a pretty far bridge there, homie. I don't know that would be accurate at all. And describing the legal maneuverings from some of its smaller shareholders in an attempt to convert this sophisticated cybercrime into an unrelated securities fraud court case. In addition to reaching a settlement on October 28th, SolarWinds said it also received a Wells notice. This is a letter from the SEC alerting the recipient that the financial watchdog may bring enforcement action against the company or an individual on the same day. So bad day to be a SolarWinds person. The U.S. regulator began investigating the Orion security snafu back in 2021. The Wells notice states that the SEC has made a preliminary determination to recommend that the SEC file an enforcement action against the company alleging violations of certain provisions of U.S. federal securities laws with respect to its cybersecurity disclosures and public statements, as well as its internal controls and disclosure controls and procedures. So there's been too many times that organizations, in my opinion, have gotten away with murder in cyber and no one gets punished. The SEC is starting to get involved here. There's two organizations that I would never want to screw with, the IRS and the SEC. I would much rather take on the FBI and the CIA and the NSA than the SEC or the IRS. They're the ones, IRS is the one that got Capone, right? So the fact that they're getting involved here and they're doing things along these lines is extremely significant. What are we going to see? I think we're beginning to see the actual teeth to some of these regulations. Now, why it's taken us this long to get there, I don't know. It's been pretty clear for a long time that who needs to be punished and how this should be applied and whatever else. But the fact that these things are taking place is a first heard, is extremely significant, and I think is hopefully going to wake up the board and other organizations to the fact that they can get hit by the SEC. Nobody in business wants to deal with the IRS or SEC, especially if they're talking about enforcement actions and those types of things. So in all the cyber stuff that I've been involved in, for me, this gives me the most hope, because I think that strategy is becoming a thing finally. I think the technology is moving in the right space. I think that the fact that these enforcement bodies are getting engaged here and are putting real teeth in place is going to begin to change how people look at this from the business level. So maybe there's some good to come out of this, maybe. Anyway, there goes the dog, because that's how it is, and he's a little bastard. But above all, stay smart, stay safe, stay secure.